think often the simplest questions are the most deceptive
Yes.
because I've employed it myself in my own methodology. What is the most prominent thing you remember from your childhood? And you're asking someone maybe 80, sometimes 90 years after their childhood has passed. What do they say? The responses are just as interesting. मुझे याद है जब हम घर छोड़ के जा रहे थे, जो औरत साथ में रहती थी उसने ब्लू ब्लाउज पहना था. I remember the smell of the mitti that the gardener used. I remember that the cook used to call me Maiya, but that wasn't my name. The things that people say are very revealing about who they are. And I think sometimes, for me, what I have learned is that the memory of home cannot really be erased. Even though new homes have been adopted many times over. And this is true for you as well. You talk so often about losing language, learning language, returning to your language. The piece you used to write in English that was translated in your hometown in Bihar, and how much you loved that translation and worked towards being true to that translation in your English. It reveals a lot about what kind of home we carry wherever we go.
बिल्कुल सही.
When you say what is your childhood like, it's very very big. They don't understand. But if you say आपके बचपन की एक चीज आपको अगर याद है तो क्या होगी वो? और वो सवाल ना बड़ी सारी चीजें खोल देता है. तो वो they will say, I mean, you can't predict what they will say, but whatever they will say will lead you to an ethnographic landscape of their childhood, which will allow you to ask more questions about it. So the question is generic enough, but also specific enough.
Yes.
I also ask things that people think are very funny, like, अच्छा बचपन में आप क्या पहनते थे? सलवार कमीज पहना था या ड्रेस पहना था? बाल कैसे करे थे? Because these are things I am genuinely interested in. When my grandmother was a child, were her hair in a braid or were they in a ponytail? You know? और ये लोगों को बहुत अजीब सा लगता है.
What is your favorite book?
My favorite book?
Of oral history.
I really like Svetlana Alexievich a lot, but I also really like Urvashi Butalia and Ritu Menon. I've learned a lot from Ritu Menon about the vocabulary of silence. मुझे याद है कई साल पहले जब मैंने I started recording these very violent interviews about what happened in the Mirpur territory that went to Pakistan eventually, and to a point where I had never recorded things of such violence. And you don't realize when they start to impact you. At least for me, it took about 5 years for me to realize that something in my personal life was not the same, which is me, myself as a person, was not the same anymore. And I began speaking to other oral historians that had done this kind of work to say, well, how do you cope? Or what happens to you? And the responses were different. Like some people said that I dream about the interview and I am the subject of the interview in my dream. And I found that very interesting. But with Ritu, she's such an insightful person. She quoted this interview she did with a lady who had been retrieved from Pakistan and brought back to India against her will.
Yeah.
And the lady's name in the book was B. And her brother brought her back and he tried to rehabilitate her into the home. And she said, I will live in an ashram because, I've come to India. That's it. I'm not doing anything more for you. But then when Ritu tried to speak to her about her experience, she didn't want to talk at all. And when I asked Ritu, many years after she stopped recording interviews, and I asked her, well, why don't you do work on partition anymore? And she said that I have no vocabulary anymore. My vocabulary of trauma, of violence, of loss is exhausted. So I find reading her very insightful. It helps me in my methodology. I also find Edmund de Waals, The Hare with Amber Eyes, a really brilliant book because it's not just about oral history. It is sort of a mixture of so many beautiful arts,
Sahi.
language, sound, travel, walking,
Sahi.
looking, because he is an artist who has become a writer, right? So I find a lot of resonance with my practice in that.
Do you have a formula? Formula is the wrong word. Do you have a considered approach to your interviews? You are an oral historian of some repute. What do you do when you approach your subject?
Often they know exactly what I'm coming for. So they are, in a sense, prepared. As much preparation as you can do with your own life story, I guess, which is a lot and very little, depending on the person. Some people have rehearsed what they want to say, which means they want their story told in a certain way. Some people have certain things they remember better than others, and other things that people around them remind them of as they go along. But for the most part, the conversation that you have with somebody about their life is always a conversation of rediscovery for them and discovery for you. I have a vague set of questions that I know I will ask, but for the most part, I don't like to limit everyone to the same set of questions because I think it sort of erodes the individuality of the person and the experience. So at the beginning, when you are going to spend 2, 3, 4, 5 hours with somebody, you need to make some sort of rapport with them. Sometimes this is easy if they know you. Other times it's quite difficult if they are unwilling. And it must be put on record that even though someone has agreed to speak to you, they may not always want to speak to you at that moment. So this can mean, like I did an interview in Jammu where I wanted to ask the man about his journey of migration, what he saw. His family had told me that his brother had been hacked to death. Another brother had been left behind in what became Pakistan. And I wanted him to tell me in his own words, because the words that people use are different from the words other people use for them. And so his family was saying, to batao na ye baat batao, wo baat batao, inki baat batao. And he was just doing this. He was moving and he was doing this. He didn't want to speak at the time, even though he had agreed for me to come and talk to him. And I realized then that silence is also a language. Of course, we know that. But in the case of violence and trauma, it is the strongest language sometimes. And you need to interpret that language with nuance and not with generalization. To say that an entire generation has lived with silence is to generalize that silence as well, because everyone's silence stems from very specific experiences, similar to what language they use to describe things. Like, I think a lot about the words people use. They will say things like, जब हम लोग जैसे पाकिस्तान से फॉर एग्जांपल पटना जा रहे थे, many Sikhs migrated, पटना साहिब था वहां पे। चाचा जब हम लोग जा रहे थे वहां पे तो बीच में सो एंड सो की डेथ हो गई, मेरे मामा की डेथ हो गई, फिर हमें बॉडी डिस्कार्ड करनी पड़ी। Just think about the word discard, right? And I think about where this comes from, where in their unique experience of their journey of migration does that word come from? How is a body discarded? पानी में डाल दिया, क्रिमेशन करा साइड पे, शमशान घाट छोड़ के आ गए, क्या करा? And I think a lot about this. But for the most part, when I'm asking questions to people, they are often born from the things that they say. But I have done a bit of research about where they come from, so I can ask more specific questions. Even if that's just that they migrated from this part to this part, I will ask about what happened in that particular city or village that they left. See, because I am trained as an artist, everything in my life comes from images. Language emerges from image, always for me. So I have this distinct image of walking to college in Canada, first discovering that I am synesthetic. And it happened because I was looking at the sun and I felt like I could taste its color.
Wow.
Not that I could taste like a lemon yellow or something, but I could taste the warmth of that color.
सही
And that is like associating color with emotion has happened to me on a number of occasions, but it happens to a lot of artists. And I find that writers don't talk about it enough, whereas they may be experiencing it equally. My language began to look visual, like in that sense, because I was a printer, I was making embossed words, blind embossed words on a page, or I was making text curtains with typewriters.
Wow,
And in
wow.
that sense, it was like a physical transition from the image into the text. But I think sometimes writers don't, I don't want to say they don't understand, but of course, they are often trained as writers as well.
Yeah, they're not as self or as conscious of it as artists might be.
But here
Art.
you are self-training yourself in another medium,
ये
and
बात है.
but still using it to create writing, to create visual, tactile, visceral writing.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm using it to create emotion. पंजाबी पोएट एक मिला मुझे लंदन में, अमरजीत चंदन, उनकी कविता है गुना चौर.
Yeah, of course. And he's such a formidable poet himself as well.
Yes. तो उनका कहना है कि भाई whenever he listens to a dhol playing, he thinks that dhol is speaking Punjabi.
It is 100%. I feel it personally. अच्छा क्या है language ना, it's like such a excellent world building formula, right? कल मेरी पड़ोसन क्या, she is auntie to me, she raised me basically, and वो बैठी थी टेबल पर हमारे साथ, तो फिर कहती क्या ये लश्कारा धूपता आया है.
अरे वाह वाह.
Oh, I need to write this down. What a beautiful, like, but it was so simple for her.
Yes.
And for me, it was this glorious beam of light. क्या लश्कारा धूपता है. You know, it was so lovely. But it's exactly what Amitava also says.
Yes.
The dhol is Punjabi.
Acha, he asked me what is my favorite word in Hindi. So what is your favorite word in Punjabi?
इसके बारे में गहरे से सोचा नहीं है. आजकल मैं फ्रेंच सीख रही हूँ, तो मैं फ्रेंच में इसके बारे में बहुत बहुत ज्यादा सोचती हूँ.
ओह वाह. तो फ्रेंच में आपकी अभी तक आपकी अगर वोकैबुलरी 50 वर्ड की भी हो, जो हो सकता है 500 वर्ड की होगी या 5000 वर्ड की होगी, उसमें से आप एक वर्ड जरा बताएं तो. और
बचपन से सेम ही वर्ड है.
अच्छा.
फेनेट.
हाँ,
फेनेट.
like the wind of Feneth, that is it.
Exactly. And when I tell French people this, they think it's very, very funny, and because it's such an ordinary word, but it is a window.
Yes.
It is an opening, it is a closing, it is a beginning, it is an end, it is a start to seasons, so many things. I've always loved this word.
It is also a word that is a window to that language for you, actually.
Exactly. It is a word that I was able to say ever since I was very young, despite complicated R and T. So I've always loved that word.
अच्छा, एक बार फिर से बोलो.
Fenêtre.
Oh, is that how you pronounce it? Beautiful. It sounds so good. I would like you to know, my dear, that when Amarjit asked me that question, I said Aanchal.
You did not. No.
I know you. I know. And this is यही तो problem है. Beautiful women never believe me, but I have it here in print. I'm sure because I must have said this. अब मुझे अगर याद है तो मैंने जरूर कहा होगा. Yes, page 135 के bottom में देखिए, मैडम. This is.
Is it in the book?
अरे 135. 135 second paragraph.
हाँ.
4th और 5th line. आप ही पढ़ दें.
क्या Chandan was on a roll. He was saying that till the Christian missionaries landed among the Latin Americans, the latter had no word for sin. I got up to get more tea for Chandan. When I sat down again, he asked me to tell him what my favorite word in Hindi was. The first one that came to mind was Aanchal.
क्या बात है? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking to Aanchal Malhotra. And you would think I planted this in the script in advance to have this conversation. Yellow, yes, it's a blue book. आपको लगता नहीं है कि because of the way in which blue is spoken of, it is often to do with मैं काफी छोटा था जब अपने visiting my mama who had a gramophone. I saw तलत महमूद की एक रिकॉर्ड थी और जहां तक मुझे याद है it was called In a Blue Mood. ठीक है? और बाद में जब वेस्टर्न म्यूजिक से familiarity हुई, then you thought of jazz musicians and other people. So what is the association of, I want to get your sense, what is your association with blue?
Of late, the only thing I think of is not so nice. It's bluing bodies, skins, something cold, something lifeless.
खुला
But
नीला आसमान नहीं होता आपके लिए भी.
आजकल मैं इसके बारे में नहीं सोचती. हाँ.
And is that because you have had a recent bereavement in your family? Is that what you...
Several. And I think the one thing I look at a lot, particularly if I spend a lot of time with somebody, is their skin, their hands, their arms. याद है मुझे मैं अपनी दादी के साथ हॉस्पिटल में थी, maybe doing very similar things to what you were doing with your father.
Sure.
उनके बारे में लिखना, जो वो कह रही हैं वो लिखना, बट मैं बार बार ना उनके ये जो वेन्स हैं उनके आर्म्स पे, उनके हाथों पे, I would be very very obsessed. I was obsessed with her hands since I've been a child. तो यही तस्वीर आती है मेरे जहन में जब मैं इसके बारे में सोचती हूँ. It's not really the wide open blue, the blue of the ocean. हालांकि उसके बाद कितनी फ्लाइट्स पे गई हूँ मैंने विंडो से देखा है कितना ब्लू, but that's never the first thing that comes to my mind. One of the things I often struggle with writing in the way that I do is the aspect of excavating but also sharing large parts of your life, of you being on every page. Sometimes in the decisions that you've taken, but other times quite literally. Your day, your travels, your thoughts, every page is autobiography. So how do you feel about such transparency with you and your family? Right? Which is something that in my second book, I didn't realize how much of me was on every page, and you're giving a lot. The other question was collecting over the years, collecting your memories, but then recollecting your years. How does it feel about memory and recollection? What are the devices that you employ to extract from your own memory?
Good question.
And then there was well, thank you. Thank you. Now, there was this line that you wrote when you were going on a residency in the Blue Book, that words come at a price. I found that really sad. Let's see. I wanted to know about your relationship with nature. You talk about it a lot, but sometimes you say you paste a petal into your page. Sometimes when I like someone very much and I give books to people that I like, friends or, people that I like, I always put a flower or a leaf in it.
Wow.
Maybe they find it, maybe they don't. But I would like to know your relationship with nature and how it's evolved over the last few years of you observing it carefully.
So, पहला सवाल, I feel I try to also say to my students, if you do not put the personal, if the account you're offering does not bite into your own skin, and if you do not feel the pain, then maybe you should leave it alone. On the other hand, I'm also aware कि बड़ी नार्सिसिस्टिक एक्सरसाइज हो जाती है अगर सिर्फ अपने बारे में आप बात कर रहे होते हो तो. And I think the real achievement of the artist or the writer is the discovery of how much is too much and how much is too little. And that you will not always succeed in striking a right balance always, but you have to risk it. I also want always to go with oneself, to carry oneself, but always out into the world. ये नहीं कि you're carrying yourself like वो जो क्या कहते हैं वो जो कश्मीर में कांगड़ा कहते हैं क्या कहते हैं वो जो when you put it under your that little कांगड़ी हैं तो उस तरह का self नहीं होना चाहिए, that little portable self that you carry everywhere in the world. Instead, it should be you carry yourself into the world. The world should be what you discover, and that should be presented on the page, but always the sense of self should be there, in my opinion. Now, the second point you said about collection and recollection. Like you, I'm a total note taker, boss, and we are assisted these days with devices like the phone, where even the photograph you take always tells you which day you took it and where you were. We are
like I asked very specifically about a thing because you said somewhere in the blue book that when you were 25, this happened, something happened. And I was thinking, well, what happens to memory over a period of 2 decades, say?
Say. Yeah. It become, when you were describing your own interviewees, and you said at one point, in some cases, the responses they give are rehearsed. I was at that moment thinking that so many of our memories are actually rehearsed memories. Huh? So I try sometimes to actually show where does that particular memory come from, or where is it overlaid with another memory, or where actually it proves to be false. I like to say, for example, कि मुझे ये चीज़ इसलिए याद है because this was my anxiety at that time, and maybe it is that fear that has produced that particular form in which the memory has been preserved. Something might have been different, So I think you're totally right. It is very important actually in our recollections, and I hope I do it both in fiction and non-fiction, try to show how fallible my own recollection is, but also show through my notes that I tried at that moment to be faithful to a particular kind of experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
अब आप ये भी आपने you noted that words come at a price. वो तो है यार. Words come at a price, लेकिन didn't our parents always tell you things like बहुत तपस्या, you don't get it. You don't get anything without a lot of penance. तपस्या का हिंदी क्या हो गया? Penance?
तपस्या तो हिंदी ही.
Sorry, what I meant was अंग्रेजी. तपस्या.
Yes, penance. Yes. But I don't think you realize that, like, your words have come at a different price than my words. They've also come at a different age than my age.
बिल्कुल. But yes, but that goes without saying. Why do you want to say it though? In order to?
No, I don't know. I was thinking why it moved me so much, because I didn't have that experience. I was not leaving any child behind anywhere, but words still come at a price. So I wanted to know what it was that moved me so much and compelled me to write that sentence down.
No, that's so nice. But in your case, they have come at a different price, and that is there is a young woman going out of her home into the world over and over to talk to strangers. That takes both imagination, boldness, courage. So price to आपने भी pay किए, and it's great, it's wonderful what you've achieved.
And you.
Thank you. We are so pleasant with each other.
No, it's true, but I do think these books,
जी
they're so different from your other books. And
हाँ
in a way, they're not so different from your other books because I can see where those books have come out of these books. You know, that little story about immigrant in immigrant Montana,
हम्म
hilarious, but that humor is carried into immigrant Montana in the same way. And then you write somewhere that a novel can come out of a journal, and that's often the case. And I see the translation, but they are still different objects, entities. And
yes
I find that these books, these two books, they are a lot more generous. They are generous books.
वाह
No, it's true
and
because there's so many points of entry into these books. And at any given point, depending on what you are experiencing in your life, you may find a different point of entry into something you've already read and seen. You know, and they are very profound and funny and honest and sad. They're quite sad.
I think, well, first of all, thank you. You're being generous when you say that, and I agree with you. And I think there lies the answer, maybe to the first question you asked, and which you accused me of having evaded during our real encounter in Delhi.
You very much evaded it, you know, because ये क्या पता है event पे क्या होता है कि हमें perform करना होता है. The event is performative, but there is no performance in these books. There is no performance. There is sometimes you see how difficult actually it is to put down the things that you have, which is why I asked about transparency, and because it alarms me a lot to see myself so much on the page, and for you it's even more so because it's direct. It's from your brain, from the center of your being to your page and then to your published piece. So it can't be easy.
Thank you. So, I think that is the generosity that you noticed there. I think is related to the question you asked earlier about synesthesia. I think when you're touching on different senses, you're opening one portal after another, and thereby you're providing, as I think you said in a different form, you're providing different doorways for the reader to enter the story or the narrative. So, gathering encouragement from what you have just said, I will proceed to do work on the Green Book, and by the end of this new year, inshallah, वो भी किताब हमारे सामने होगी, and then we must do this again.
Yes.
In person.
In person. What color will the cover be of the Green Book?
वही मैं कहता हूँ ना.
That's curious.
मैं समझ रहा हूँ आपकी बात. आपकी तलवार की नोक पे, मैं समझता हूँ कि मेरे नाक पर ही आपकी तलवार की नोक है. सब ठीक है.
मैं तो ये, it's a legitimate question, you know.
सही है. Tomorrow when I send you the picture of my the two diaries that I have, I will also send you a picture of a little thing I made of Dev Prayag, जहाँ पर गंगा की पीली the yellowish flow of Bhagirathi meets the greenish flow of bluish flow of Alaknanda in order to form Ganga. And I was thinking कि I'll have just a corner of the green, but it will be the other colors that make the green that will be the cover.
Oh yes. So you have thought about this?
अभी आज ही सोच रहा था, इसलिए मैं बता रहा हूँ.